The winding mountain road, barely wider than her sedan, finally surrendered to a gravel path, its uneven surface crunching beneath the tires like forgotten secrets. Ilara gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, a nervous anticipation fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with the precarious drive. It was the promise of silence, of solitude, a balm for the relentless hum of her city life, the incessant demands of her architectural firm. The Emberwood Sanctuary. The name itself had been a whisper of hope in a particularly chaotic year. A clearing opened up, revealing a breathtaking sight. Nestled amongst ancient pines, their boughs heavy with the recent dusting of snow, stood a collection of timber and stone structures. The main lodge, robust and welcoming, exuded an aura of rustic elegance, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. Wisps of smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, carrying the faint, comforting scent of burning wood on the crisp, clean air. It wasn't just beautiful, it felt unright. A sigh, long held, escaped Ilara's lips. This was precisely what she had craved. She parked near the main entrance, cutting the engine, and for a moment, simply listened. The only sounds were the soft sigh of the wind through the pines and the distant melodic gurgle of a hidden stream. It was a symphony of peace, a stark contrast to the cacophony she'd left behind. Stepping out of the car, the cold air bit at her cheeks, but it was invigorating, not harsh. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the clean, pine-scented oxygen, feeling a lightness she hadn't realized she'd lost. As she reached for her overnight bag, the heavy oak door of the main lodge swung open. A man stood silhouetted against the warm interior light, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding without being overbearing. He had the rugged build of someone who spent his days outdoors, yet there was a refined grace in his posture. As he stepped forward, into the fading twilight, Ilara saw him more clearly. His hair was dark, a rich espresso brown, falling just short of his collar, and his eyes, she noticed instantly, were the startling deep blue of a winter sky. They held a quiet intensity, a knowing warmth that made her stomach clench in a way it hadn't in years. Ilara Vance? His voice was a low, resonant rumble, a sound that seemed to settle deep in her bones. Welcome to Emberwood. I'm Kale. He extended a hand, large and calloused, yet surprisingly gentle as it enveloped hers. A spark, undeniable and immediate, jumped between them, a jolt that made her breath catch. His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, and for a fleeting second, the world narrowed to just that touch, that unexpected current. Kale, she managed, her voice a little breathier than she intended. She felt a flush creep up her neck, a telltale sign of her sudden discomfiture, and an even greater, more unsettling awareness. It's even more beautiful than the pictures. He smiled then, a slow, easy curve of his lips that softened the chiseled planes of his face, revealing a faint crinkle at the corners of his eyes. We like to think so. Come in. Let's get you settled. The fire's roaring, and I imagine you've had a long drive. He retrieved her bags with an effortless strength, leading her into the lodge. The interior was a revelation of comfort and artistry. Polished dark wood gleamed under the soft glow of sconces, and a massive stone fireplace dominated the main common room, a blaze of golden light and crackling warmth. Plush leather armchairs were arranged invitingly around it, and a scent, a divine blend of wood smoke, old books, and something subtly spicy and masculine, filled the air. It was a scent that, even now, she instinctively associated with Kale. I have you in the hemlock suite, he said, guiding her towards a secluded wing. It's one of our favorites, private, with a view of the stream and the old-growth forest. As he spoke, Ilara found herself stealing glances at him. The way his jeans clung to his powerful thighs, the subtle flex of his shoulders beneath his thick wool sweater. There was an earthiness about him, a grounded presence that was deeply appealing. He was not just handsome, he was solid, real, and utterly captivating. The Hemlock Suite was indeed a sanctuary within a sanctuary. A spacious room with a towering stone fireplace of its own, a four-poster bed draped in rich cream-colored linens, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the snow-dusted forest like a living painting. A thick sheepskin rug lay before the hearth, and a small, intimate dining nook offered a quiet space for contemplation. "This is incredible," Ilara breathed, walking further into the room, her fingers trailing over the smooth wood of a handcrafted dresser. Kale placed her bags gently beside the bed. "I hope you find the peace you're looking for here, Ilara." His voice was softer now, more personal, as if he could read the unspoken longing in her heart. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I think I might." The silence that stretched between them then was not awkward, but charged, brimming with unspoken questions and nascent possibilities. His eyes held hers, a quiet intensity that seemed to peel back layers she usually kept firmly in place. She felt seen, truly seen, in a way that was both unsettling and profoundly exhilarating. "If you need anything at all," he finally said, breaking the spell, though the connection remained a fragile thread shimmering in the air. "There's a phone on the nightstand, or you can find me in the main lodge. Dinner is served around 7, whenever you're ready." "Thank you, Kale," she murmured, her voice still a little husky. He gave her another one of his slow smiles, a smile that promised secrets and kindled a warmth deep within her. "Enjoy your evening, Ilara." And then, with a nod, he was gone, leaving her alone in the elegant suite, the scent of him lingering faintly in the air, a phantom touch on her hand. Ilara stood for a long moment, simply absorbing the silence, the warmth, the sheer beauty of her surroundings. But her thoughts kept circling back to Kale. His eyes, his smile, the unexpected current that had arced between them. She'd come here for solitude, for a reset, to quiet the clamor of her mind. She hadn't anticipated such an immediate, visceral connection with another human being, least of all a man who seemed to have stepped out of a dream. Unpacking was a blur. She moved through the motions, her mind replaying their brief encounter. She ran a bath, pouring in the fragrant salts provided by the sanctuary, letting the hot water soothe her travel-weary muscles. As she sank into the bubbles, she closed her eyes, picturing him again. The subtle strength in his jawline, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the depth of his gaze. It was a potent image, one that sparked a long-dormant fire within her. After her bath, feeling refreshed and surprisingly restless, she dressed in a simple cashmere sweater and dark jeans, wanting to feel comfortable yet presentable. She brushed out her long, dark hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders. A touch of lip gloss, a hint of mascara. She wanted to look like herself, but perhaps a slightly more hopeful, open version of herself. When she descended to the main lodge, the common room was even more inviting. The fire blazed, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and soft jazz played from unseen speakers. Only a few other guests were scattered in the armchairs, reading quietly or sipping drinks. Kale was nowhere in sight. A small pang of disappointment, sharp and unexpected, pricked at her. She realized with a jolt how much she had been looking forward to seeing him again. A young woman with a kind smile, perhaps an assistant, approached her. "Miss Vance, a table for one. Or would you like to join the communal table?" Ilara hesitated. "Is there... Kale, is he dining tonight?" The woman's smile widened. "Mr. Thorne usually dines with guests, yes. He's just finishing up some work in his office. He'll be out shortly." A wave of relief, ridiculously potent, washed over her. "Then the communal table would be lovely," Ilara said, feeling a warmth spread through her, unrelated to the roaring fire. She was led to a large, polished wood table set for several, though only 2 other couples were currently seated. They greeted her warmly, making space, and Ilara found herself engaging in pleasant, easy conversation about the beauty of the sanctuary and their reasons for being there. But even as she spoke, a part of her was attuned to the entrance, waiting. And then he appeared. Kale, dressed in a crisper, darker shirt, but still with that same rugged elegance. His eyes swept the room, pausing on her, and a subtle knowing smile touched his lips. He moved with an unhurried grace, greeting the other guests before pulling out the empty chair directly opposite Ilara. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low thrum that cut through the gentle murmur of conversation. "I trust you're settling in well?" "Perfectly, thank you," she replied, feeling a blush creep into her cheeks again. Being this close to him across the intimate span of the table was a different kind of intensity. His scent, that subtle blend of pine and something else, something uniquely him, was more pronounced now. It was intoxicating. The conversation flowed easily, guided by Cale's easy charm and insightful questions. He was a captivating storyteller, sharing anecdotes about the sanctuary, its history, and the surrounding wilderness. He spoke of the land with a deep reverence, his passion for it evident in every word, every gesture. Ilara found herself hanging on his every utterance, fascinated not just by the stories but by the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of something he loved, the way his hands moved expressively. They talked about her work, her passion for design, her current need for a creative reset. He listened intently, his gaze unwavering, making her feel as though her words were the most important thing he'd heard all day. There was no pretense, no artifice, just a genuine curiosity and connection. At one point, as he reached for his wine glass, his arm brushed lightly against hers. The contact was fleeting, barely there, yet it sent a shiver tracing down her arm. A silent electric current. She instinctively pulled back, just slightly, but her eyes flew to his. His gaze met hers, a flash of understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the spark. He didn't apologize, didn't move away further. He simply held her gaze for an extra beat, a silent question hanging in the air. Dinner was a delicious, hearty affair. Roasted venison with root vegetables, followed by a rich berry crumble. But Ilara was barely aware of the food. Her senses were heightened, focused entirely on Cale. The way the firelight caught the planes of his face, making his eyes seem even deeper. The gentle curve of his smile when he laughed. The easy confidence in his posture. As the meal wound down, the other couples began to drift away, some to their rooms, others to linger by the fire. Ilara found herself alone at the table with Cale. The intimacy of the moment was palpable, a soft hum in the quiet room. "So?" he said, leaning back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "A creative reset, you said. What does that entail for an architect?" She chuckled softly. "Usually, staring blankly at a blank page for days, hoping inspiration strikes. Or long walks in beautiful places, trying to reconnect with the muse." She paused, then added, "And perhaps rediscovering a sense of wonder. And have you found it yet?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, his blue eyes piercing, as if searching for something specific within her. Ilara felt a wave of heat wash over her, a blush that started at her chest and bloomed upwards. She thought of their first touch, the way he looked at her, the unexpected thrill that had settled in her heart. "Perhaps," she admitted, her voice barely audible, "perhaps I've found the beginnings of it." He held her gaze, a silent conversation passing between them, a language of desire and possibility. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken longing. It felt as though every nerve ending in her body was alive, humming with an exquisite tension. She wanted to reach out, to trace the line of his jaw, to feel the warmth of his skin against hers. The thought was brazen, thrilling, and utterly terrifying. "It's getting late," she said finally, breaking the spell, though she hated to. Her heart was thrumming, a frantic drum against her ribs. "It is," Cale agreed, but he made no move to rise. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes still locked on hers. "Are you warm enough for the walk back to your suite?" "Oh, yes, of course," she managed, trying to sound nonchalant, though her entire being was screaming for him to lean closer still, to bridge the distance between them. He rose then, his chair scraping softly against the polished floor. Ilara stood too, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. He walked her to the entrance of her wing. The silence between them weighted with unspoken things. "Good night, Ilara," he said, stopping just outside her door. His voice was a soft rumble in the quiet corridor. "Good night, Cale," she replied, her eyes finding his in the dim light. She wished she had something more profound to say, something that encapsulated the whirlwind of emotions he had stirred in her. He simply stood there for a moment longer, his gaze lingering on her face, a hint of something unreadable in his deep blue eyes. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted his hand, his fingers brushing lightly, infinitesimally, against her cheek. It was a feather-light touch, barely there, but it sent a shockwave through her, igniting every nerve ending. Her breath hitched. His thumb lingered for just a second, a gentle caress, before he slowly withdrew his hand. "Sleep well," he murmured, his voice now a low, intimate whisper that seemed to curl around her heart. And then he was gone, retreating down the softly lit corridor, leaving Elara standing there, her cheek tingling, her body alight with a yearning she hadn't felt in years. She touched her fingers to the spot where his skin had met hers, feeling the phantom warmth, the ghost of his touch. Inside her suite, the fire still burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows. She walked to the window, gazing out at the ink-black forest, silvered by the moonlight. The whispers of the wind through the pines seemed to carry his name, his scent. She climbed into the luxurious bed, the soft linens cool against her heated skin. But sleep felt a million miles away. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of his image, his voice, his touch. The quiet solitude she had yearned for was now filled with the echo of his presence, the delicious, tormenting anticipation of what tomorrow might bring. She pulled the thick duvet up to her chin, but it did little to quell the fire he had ignited within her. Underneath the soft covers, her thoughts were a torrent of whispered desires, a silent plea for more of him, for the touch she craved, for the connection that had bloomed so unexpectedly, so powerfully, on this secluded mountain. The first tendrils of dawn, a soft whisper of peach and gold, began to paint the sky beyond her window, filtering through the lace curtains Elara had drawn the night before. She stirred, slowly unfurling from the depths of sleep, and for a fleeting moment, the world was just the scent of pine and crisp mountain air, a gentle warmth seeping into the room. Then, like a sudden intake of breath, the memories of the previous evening flooded her. His aunts, his voice, his hands, even in the briefest, most accidental of touches, had left an indelible impression, a burning imprint on her skin and soul. A deep, unfamiliar ache bloomed low in her belly, a sweet, potent thrum that was both unsettling and utterly intoxicating. It was the echo of unfulfilled desire, a silent testament to the man sleeping just a few rooms away. She pushed the duvet back, her bare arm feeling the cool morning air, then the gooseflesh rising in a delicious shiver. Getting up, she padded to the window, pulling aside the curtain. The world outside was hushed, glistening with dew. A faint wisp of smoke curled from the chimney of the main lodge, a sign of life beginning. She found herself wondering if he was awake, if his thoughts too were consumed by the same exquisite torment. The quiet solitude she had sought was now irrevocably altered, enriched by a vibrant, pulsating energy. She found herself smiling, a slow, private smile that felt utterly foreign, yet undeniably right. A new chapter had begun on this secluded mountain, and with it, a new longing she hadn't known she possessed. After a long steamy shower that did little to cool the internal fire, Elara dressed in soft, comfortable leggings and a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Its luxurious warmth felt like a gentle embrace against her skin, a quiet indulgence before facing the day. She caught her reflection in the mirror, her cheeks flushed, her eyes alight with an unfamiliar spark. She looked expectant, hopeful, and a little bit terrified. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and something savory wafted up from downstairs, pulling her from her reverie. He was awake. He was cooking. A nervous flutter took hold in her chest, a hummingbird's frantic beat. Taking a steadying breath, she descended the polished wooden stairs, each step a gentle creak in the morning stillness. He was in the kitchen, just as she'd imagined, standing by the stove with his back to her. The broad line of his shoulders, subtly defined beneath a simple charcoal t-shirt, was a sight that made her pause, a silent appreciation for his quiet strength. His dark hair was still a little tousled, hinting at recent sleep, and the morning light caught the subtle curve of his neck as he bent over the pan. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little softer than she intended, a little breathier. He turned, a slow, deliberate movement, and his eyes, dark and deep, met hers. The intensity of his gaze was immediate, a warmth that enveloped her, pulling her into the quiet space between them. A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and sent a shiver down her spine. "Morning, Ilara," he replied, his voice a low rumble, richer than the coffee scent filling the air. "Slept well?" The question hung in the air, laden with unspoken meaning. "Did you dream of me? Were your thoughts as restless as mine?" She felt a blush creep up her neck. "Well enough," she managed, walking towards the counter where a mug of coffee already awaited her, steaming invitingly. "And you, Reese?" He chuckled softly, a sound that resonated deep within her. "Like a man who's been waiting for dawn," he admitted, his eyes holding hers for a beat too long, a silent confession that mirrored her own. "I hope you don't mind me taking over the kitchen. I tend to wake early, and the mountain air always makes me hungry." "Not at all," she said, picking up her mug, the warmth seeping into her hands. "It smells incredible. What are you making?" "Just some scrambled eggs with chives from the garden," he gestured with the spatula, "and a bit of local bacon. And coffee, of course. Plenty of coffee." They fell into a comfortable rhythm as she poured herself a cup and found a seat at the rustic wooden table, watching him move with an effortless grace around the kitchen. His movements were precise, confident, yet unhurried. The way he handled the pan, the way his gaze would flick to hers every now and then, a quick, intimate connection before returning to his task, made her heart quicken. When he finally brought 2 plates to the table, laden with golden eggs, crispy bacon, and thick slices of sourdough toast, the simple meal felt like a feast. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clinking of forks and the distant calls of birds. Each bite was delicious, but it was the quiet intimacy of the shared meal, the unspoken awareness of each other, that truly nourished her. "This is wonderful, Reese," she said genuinely. "You're quite the chef." He leaned back, a faint flush on his cheeks. "Just simple fare, but I believe in starting the day right." His gaze lingered on her, warm and appraising. "You look refreshed." She felt the heat rise again, a delightful warmth spreading through her. "And you," she countered, "look perfectly at home." "I suppose I do," he admitted, his eyes sweeping around the cozy kitchen, then returning to her. "There's a certain magic to these mountain retreats, isn't there? A way they strip away the superficial and leave you with what truly matters." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. What truly matters? She knew, with a certainty that vibrated through her very bones, that he was talking about more than just the cabin or the view. He was talking about connection, about the raw, undeniable pull between them. After breakfast, Reese suggested a walk. "There's a trail that leads to an incredible overlook," he explained, "just a couple of miles up. The air is clear, and the views will be spectacular today." Ilara's heart leaped at the prospect of more time with him, more shared moments. "I'd love that," she said, perhaps a little too eagerly. They gathered their things, water bottles, a small day pack Reese had brought, and Ilara grabbed a light scarf against the potential chill at higher altitudes. As they stepped out, the mountain air was a refreshing balm, crisp and clean. The sun was higher now, dappling through the tall pines, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the narrow dirt path. Reese led the way, his stride long and easy. Ilara followed, her eyes drawn to the steady rhythm of his movements, the subtle flecks of muscle beneath his clothes. He occasionally pointed out a particularly interesting tree, or the flash of a bird's wing, his voice a low, pleasant murmur that seemed to perfectly suit the quiet dignity of the forest. The path began to steepen, winding its way through ancient, moss-covered trees. A particularly tricky section, where loose stones made the footing uncertain, caused Ilara to stumble slightly. Before she could even register the loss of balance, Reese's hand was there, strong and firm, grasping her arm just above the elbow. His touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to her core, sending a dizzying warmth through her veins. "Careful there," he murmured, his voice close, his breath a warm whisper against her hair as he steadied her. His fingers lingered, a gentle pressure that promised support, but also hinted at something deeper. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little shaky. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, and found his gaze already on her, dark and intense. The proximity was intoxicating. She could smell the clean scent of his skin, the subtle hint of pine, and something uniquely oriental. For a long moment, they stood frozen, suspended in the silent language of touch and longing. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Finally, with a soft sigh, he released her, though his eyes never left hers. "It gets a little rougher here," he explained, his voice a little gruffer now, as if he too felt the powerful shift in the atmosphere. "Would you like to take my hand? Just for this stretch?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes," she breathed without hesitation. His hand, warm and calloused, closed around hers. It was a perfect fit, his fingers long and strong, enveloping hers completely. The simple act of holding hands felt profoundly intimate. A silent promise. As they continued up the path, their steps synchronized. The rhythm of their bodies moving together became a natural extension of the connection that had sparked between them. The mountain, with its rugged beauty and ancient wisdom, seemed to approve. They reached the overlook after what felt like both an eternity and a fleeting moment. The view was breathtaking. The world stretched out before them, a tapestry of rolling green peaks, distant valleys shrouded in a blue haze, and a sky so vast and clear it felt like an invitation to limitless possibilities. A gentle breeze whispered past them, rustling her hair and carrying the scent of wild herbs. Reese led her to a large flat rock at the edge of the overlook. "Here," he said, gesturing for her to sit. He settled beside her, their shoulders almost touching, the warmth of his presence a comforting anchor against the vastness of the landscape. They sat in silence for a while, simply absorbing the majesty of it all. But the silence between them was not empty. It was rich, resonant, filled with the unspoken thoughts and desires that hummed beneath the surface. "It's incredible," Alara finally whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "It is," Reese agreed, his voice a low murmur. He turned his head, his eyes meeting hers, and the intensity was back, a current that flowed between them. "Sometimes you need to step away from everything familiar to truly see what's important, don't you think?" She nodded, her gaze locked with his. "I came here for quiet, for solitude, to find some clarity." She paused, a small, self-conscious smile playing on her lips. "I certainly didn't expect this." She gestured vaguely between them. Reese's thumb brushed lightly over the back of her hand, a gesture that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. "Neither did I, Alara," he admitted, his voice softening, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. "I came here to clear my head to make some difficult decisions, but some things I've learned are simply beyond planning." His words resonated deeply. She felt a sudden urge to confide in him, to lay bare the anxieties and hopes that had brought her to this secluded place. "I've been feeling adrift," she began, her voice barely a whisper, as if sharing a secret with the mountain itself. "My life felt like it was on a prescribed path, and suddenly I realized it wasn't the me path anymore. I needed to escape, to breathe, to figure out who I was without all the expectations." He listened, his gaze unwavering, his hand still gently caressing hers. When she finished, he didn't offer platitudes or solutions. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand. "That takes courage, Alara," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet understanding. "To acknowledge that, and to seek it out. Most people just keep walking the old path, even if it's crumbling beneath their feet." "And you?" she asked, turning the question back to him. "And? What decisions are you facing?" He looked out at the distant peaks, a thoughtful expression on his face. "My work, it's demanding, all-consuming at times. I've built something I'm proud of, but I've realized lately that it's left little room for anything else, for connection, for life outside of boardrooms and deadlines." He turned back to her, a faint rueful smile touching his lips. I'm realizing that the view from the top isn't quite as satisfying if there's no one to share it with. His honesty disarmed her, drawing them even closer. The air between them crackled with an unspoken understanding, a shared sense of being at a crossroads, of yearning for something more profound. Perhaps, Elara ventured, her voice soft, we both came to the mountain seeking clarity, and found a different kind of answer. Rhys's gaze deepened, a spark igniting in their depths. He shifted, turning more fully towards her, his knee brushing against hers. He lifted his other hand, and with a feather-light touch traced the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Her breath hitched. The world narrowed to the exquisite sensation of his touch, the warmth radiating from his skin, the quiet thrumming of her own pulse. Perhaps, he echoed. His voice a low, husky whisper, his eyes dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. Perhaps the answer was never in solitude at all, but in finding a reflection of ourselves in another. The air was thick with unspoken desire, a tension so palpable it hummed in her ears. Her lips parted slightly, a silent invitation. His gaze intensified, a raw, hungry light in his eyes. She leaned in almost imperceptibly, drawn by an invisible force, her own longing a powerful magnet. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would kiss her. The anticipation was exquisite, a sweet torture that made her limbs tremble. But then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lowered his hand, though his fingers brushed hers as they withdrew. A lingering caress that promised more. He took a deep, steadying breath, his chest rising and falling. We should start heading back, he said, his voice a little rougher than before, as if he too was fighting an internal battle. The sun will start to dip, and the trail can be tricky in the twilight. A wave of disappointment washed over her, sharp and unexpected, quickly followed by a rush of heat, as she realized how desperately she had wanted him to kiss her. Yet, there was also a delicious thrill in the restraint, in the building tension. It was a promise, not a denial. The walk back was quieter, the unspoken desire between them a tangible presence. Their hands, however, found each other again naturally, their fingers intertwining as they navigated the path. A silent comfort, and an electric connection. Back at the cabin, as the sun dipped below the peaks, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a different kind of warmth enveloped them. Rhys had started a fire in the stone fireplace, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, filling the living room with a cozy glow, and the scent of wood smoke. "What do you feel like for dinner?" he asked, his voice softer now, as they stood by the roaring fire. "I picked up some incredible local cheeses and a bottle of wine from the nearby vineyard. Or, I could whip up something more substantial." "Just the cheese and wine sounds perfect," Elara murmured, her gaze drawn to the flickering flames, but her awareness acutely tuned to him. The idea of a simple, intimate evening, bathed in firelight and shared wine, was infinitely more appealing than any elaborate meal. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made her heart skip. "Excellent choice." They settled on the plush rug in front of the fireplace, a thick wool blanket draped over their laps. Rhys uncorked the bottle of red wine, the rich aroma mingling with the smoke and pine. He poured 2 glasses, the ruby liquid gleaming in the firelight. The cheeses were artisanal, accompanied by crusty bread and fresh figs. The conversation flowed easily, meandering from light-hearted anecdotes to deeper reflections, punctuated by comfortable silences and lingering glances. Elara found herself laughing more freely than she had in months, genuinely, wholeheartedly. Rhys had a dry wit, a charming way of telling stories that drew her in, and a profound curiosity about her life and her thoughts. He listened intently, his dark eyes never leaving hers, making her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't felt in a very long time. As the evening deepened, the wine warmed them from the inside out, and the fire cast longer, more intimate shadows. The world outside the cabin seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, wrapped in a bubble of growing connection. Rhys reached for her hand across the blanket, his fingers tracing the delicate bones of her wrist. "Elara," he began, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "There's something about you." He trailed off, searching for the right words, his thumb gently caressing her skin. She held her breath, her gaze locked on his, the firelight dancing in their depths. "What is it, Reese?" she prompted, her voice barely audible. He leaned closer, his eyes intense, a raw, beautiful vulnerability in their depths. "You have a light about you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A quiet strength, and a way of looking at the world that's captivating. I feel like I've known you for years, yet I'm constantly discovering new facets of you." Her heart swelled, a tender ache blooming in her chest. His words, honest and heartfelt, were a balm to her soul, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had taken root between them. "I feel the same about you, Reese," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "You're a revelation. I didn't realize how much I needed to meet someone like you." His thumb continued its gentle caress, sending shivers through her. He shifted again, his body turning more fully towards her, closing the last remaining distance between them. The blanket pulled around their laps, a soft barrier, yet their knees were now touching, the warmth of his legs seeping through her leggings. His gaze dropped to her lips, a silent question, a burning invitation. Her breath caught in her throat. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back. This time, the air was thick with the promise of release, of surrender. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he leaned in. Her eyes fluttered shut, her anticipation a delicious torment. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips, the subtle scent of wine and his unique masculine fragrance filling her senses. Her heart hammered, a wild drumbeat in her ears. Then, his lips met hers. It was a tentative touch at first, soft and questioning, a delicate exploration. But in that instant, a spark ignited, a fierce, hungry flame that consumed her. She responded instinctively, her lips parting, inviting him deeper. And he accepted, with a soft groan that vibrated through her, deepening the kiss. His hand left her wrist, moving to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, sending delicious shivers down her spine. The other hand found the small of her back, drawing her closer, pressing her body gently against his. The blanket became a soft barrier between them, but the heat of their bodies, the yearning, pressed through it, fusing them together. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more passionate. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of discovery, of a connection that felt ancient and new, all at once. Her fingers, without conscious thought, tangled in his soft dark hair, pulling him closer, wanting to dissolve into him. She tasted wine, and something else, something warm and intoxicating, something uniquely Reese. Time ceased to exist. There was only the feel of his lips on hers, the soft rasp of his stubble against her skin, the gentle pressure of his body against hers, the wild, exhilarating thrum of desire that coursed through every fiber of her being. It was a kiss that promised everything, yet left her aching for more, a sweet, potent hunger that bloomed deep within her. When he finally, reluctantly pulled back, their lips still brushed, unwilling to completely separate. Their eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, met. His breath was ragged, his chest rising and falling heavily. Her own breathing was shallow and quick, her body trembling with the aftershocks of his touch. "Elara," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze burning into hers. "You have no idea." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. She understood. She felt it too, this overwhelming, intoxicating pull. This wasn't just desire, it was a profound connection, a recognition of souls. He leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes for a moment, as if trying to regain control, to savor the moment. Her fingers, still tangled in his hair, gently caressed his scalp. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm golden glow over their entwined forms. The night was still young, and the promise of what it held, what they held, shimmered in the air, potent and irresistible. Her journey to clarity had taken an unexpected turn, leading her not to solitude, but to a connection more profound than she could have ever imagined. A connection that had just begun to unfold its exquisite layers. His lips, still warm and seeking, lingered for a moment longer, a soft brush against hers that felt like a secret promise whispered on the wind. Her breath, which had caught in her throat during the surge of the kiss, now escaped in a soft, involuntary sigh, a sound that seemed to hum with the deep resonance of contentment and burgeoning desire. She felt the subtle shift of his weight, the deepening of their bodies pressed together, a silent conversation in the language of skin and muscle. His hands, which had so recently cradled her face, now moved with a slow, deliberate grace, leaving a trail of warmth as they slid from her jaw, down her neck, and settled gently on her waist. From there, they began a soft descent, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, feeling the subtle tension and release of her muscles, the yielding softness of her sweater beneath his palms. Each movement was an inquiry, a question asked without words, and her body answered with an eager, almost imperceptible tremor. Her own fingers, still tangled in the soft strands of his hair, now drifted lower, tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the intriguing texture of his slight stubble against her fingertips. It was a small detail, but in that moment, it felt profoundly intimate, a discovery she savored. The warmth between them was no longer just the ambient heat of the fire. It was a burgeoning ember within, spreading from the point of their contact, radiating outward through every nerve ending. He pulled back just an inch, his eyes dark and fathomless in the flickering firelight, searching hers. There was a question in their depths, a silent query about consent, about boundaries, about the dizzying speed at which their connection was unfurling. Her answer was immediate and unequivocal, a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her gaze mirroring the profound desire she saw reflected in his. There was no need for words. Their souls were speaking volumes. A soft murmur, like a rumble of distant thunder, vibrated in his chest as his lips found hers again, this time with a gentler, more exploratory touch. It was less a kiss of passion and more a kiss of profound recognition, a lingering taste that promised deeper exploration. His hands, still on her back, began a slow, sensual journey upward, reaching the hem of her sweater. He tugged gently, a silent invitation, and she understood. With a soft intake of breath, she lifted her arms, allowing him to ease the soft wool over her head. The fabric, once a comforting barrier, now felt like an unnecessary obstruction. As it came away, the cool air of the cabin brushed against her warmed skin, a delicious contrast that made her shiver slightly. He watched her, his eyes still locked on hers, a silent appreciation in their depths as her silk camisole was revealed, its delicate lace trim hinting at the soft curves beneath. His gaze lingered on the gentle swell of her chest, the subtle rise and fall with each quickened breath. Her turn. Her fingers, emboldened by his touch, now moved to the buttons of his flannel shirt. Each fastening seemed to hold a world of anticipation. The rough texture of the fabric gave way to the warmth of his skin as she unfastened the last button, slowly pulling the edges apart. The firelight danced across his chest, highlighting the taut muscles, the fine scattering of dark hair, the strong line of his collarbones. She laid her palm flat against his skin, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her touch, a rhythm that began to synchronize with her own. He let out a low, guttural sound, a soft groan of pleasure that vibrated through her hand and into her very core. He removed his shirt, tossing it carelessly aside onto the rug, his movements fluid and powerful. The sight of his bare torso, sculpted by strength and grace, took her breath away. He was magnificent, a primal force of nature, yet his touch remained exquisitely gentle. He reached for the straps of her camisole, his thumbs brushing lightly against the sensitive skin of her shoulders. As he nudged them down, the silk whispered against her skin as it slipped, a soft caress before it pulled around her waist, leaving her bare to the waist. A gasp escaped her lips, a mixture of vulnerability and exhilaration. She felt utterly exposed, yet utterly safe in his gaze. His eyes, full of reverence and a burning hunger, devoured the sight of her, making her feel beautiful in a way she had never quite experienced before. He reached out, his calloused fingertips tracing the delicate curve of her collarbone, then descending slowly, teasingly, to the soft swell of her breasts. A shock of pure sensation coursed through her, igniting a trail of fire in its wake. Her head tilted back, a silent invitation, as his lips found her neck, tracing a path of exquisite torment and delight. He moved with a languid precision, each kiss a deliberate declaration, each soft bite a whisper of deeper desire. She closed her eyes, letting her senses take over. The warmth of his mouth, the faint scent of pine, and his own unique musk, the subtle rasp of his stubble against her skin. It was intoxicating, a potent elixir that dissolved all conscious thought, leaving only sensation. His hands, never still, continued their exploration, circling her waist, then dipping lower to the fastening of her skirt. The zipper yielded with a soft rasp, and the heavy fabric, like her sweater before it, began its descent. She stepped out of it, the skirt falling to the rug, joining the growing pile of discarded clothes, a testament to the shedding of inhibitions, the stripping away of the mundane world. She was left in just her lace briefs, a sheer whisper of fabric that left little to the imagination. He knelt before her, his gaze unwavering, his hands resting lightly on her hips. The intensity in his eyes was almost unbearable, a silent question that burned with an unspoken passion. She reached out, her fingers finding the belt of his jeans, then the button, then the zipper. The metallic sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet cabin, a punctuation mark in their silent dance. He helped her, his hips shifting, allowing her to ease the denim down his powerful legs. He stepped out of them, and then his boxers, finally standing before her, magnificent and unashamed. Her eyes widened slightly, taking in the full measure of him. He was a vision of raw masculine beauty, perfectly sculpted, yet infused with an inherent gentleness that drew her in. There was a moment of pure, breathtaking appreciation, a silent acknowledgement of the beauty of the human form, of his form, bathed in the dancing firelight. He reached for her then, pulling her gently into his embrace, skin to skin. The shock of contact was electrifying, a powerful jolt that made her gasp. His bare chest, warm and firm, pressed against her soft breasts, the distinct thud of his heart reverberating through her own. Her arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, her fingers burying themselves in the thick hair at his nape. They stood like that for a long moment, simply breathing each other in, feeling the delicious friction of skin against skin, the rising heat of their shared desire. The world outside the cabin ceased to exist. There was only the flickering fire, the soft sounds of the night, and the profound, undeniable connection between them. His lips found hers again, this time with a fierce urgency, a hunger that matched her own. It was a kiss that devoured, that claimed, that promised everything. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, her body molding against his. She felt the powerful strength of him, the hard planes of his muscles, the intoxicating scent of his skin filling her senses. He carried her to the thick fur rug spread before the fireplace, lowering her gently onto its luxurious softness. The fur felt incredibly sensuous against her bare skin, a plush cushion that seemed to amplify every sensation. He followed her down, his weight settling beside her, then above her, propped on his forearms, his eyes still locked on hers. He was a vision of rugged beauty, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his pupils dilated with desire, yet there was a tenderness in his gaze that melted her very core. She reached up, her fingers tracing the curve of his cheekbone, the faint stubble, a delightful rasp against her skin. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through her. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a declaration, a recognition of her inner light shining through her eyes. "So are you," she breathed, her voice a little shaky, a little breathless. She meant it. He was more than beautiful, he was captivating, a man of strength and quiet intensity, who had, in a matter of hours, turned her world deliciously upside down. He lowered his head, his lips finding the soft hollow of her throat, then traveling lower, to the pulse point at her collarbone, then to the delicate curve of her breast. A shiver coursed through her, a wave of pure pleasure. His touch was exquisite, a slow, deliberate exploration that left her aching for more. Her hands threaded through his hair, her fingers tightening, urging him closer, deeper. He tasted her, a gentle, reverent exploration that made her arch into him, a soft moan escaping her lips. The firelight flickered, casting a golden glow over their entwined forms, highlighting the curve of her hip, the tautness of his muscles. The air in the cabin grew thick with unspoken desires, with the scent of their mingled bodies, with the crackling energy that hummed between them. His hand drifted lower, tracing the line of her hip, then the smooth curve of her inner thigh. His touch was feather-light, yet it ignited a trail of fire wherever it landed. She gasped, her body trembling with anticipation, with a hunger she hadn't known she possessed until now. Her journey to clarity, which had begun with a yearning for solitude, had taken an unexpected, exhilarating turn. This connection, this man, was clearing away a different kind of fog, revealing a landscape of passion and intimacy she hadn't dared to imagine. His lips found hers again, a kiss that deepened with every passing moment, a dance of tongues and breaths, a mutual surrender to the exquisite pull of desire. Her legs intertwined with his, the rough hair on his thighs a delicious friction against her smooth skin. The press of his hips against hers was a silent promise of what was to come, a slow, sensual grind that made her senses reel. She felt his warmth, his strength, his presence, surrounding her, enveloping her. There was a sense of utter rightness, a feeling of coming home to a place she never knew existed. Each touch, each kiss, each whispered breath was a layer unfolding, revealing a deeper facet of their connection. The night was still young, and the promise of what it held, what Roya held, shimmered in the air, potent and irresistible. Her journey to clarity had taken an unexpected turn, leading her not to solitude, but to a connection more profound than she could have ever imagined, a connection that had just begun to unfold its exquisite layers. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to absorb each new sensation. His lips trailed from her mouth, down her jawline, to the sensitive skin behind her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Tell me if this is too much." He murmured against her skin, his voice thick with desire, yet laced with a profound respect that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Never," she whispered back, her voice barely audible, lost in the rising tide of sensation. "It's perfect." Her hands, still tangled in his hair, urged him closer, her fingers flexing against his scalp. She felt a surge of power, of agency, in this moment of vulnerability. It wasn't a passive surrender. It was an active embrace, a mutual exploration. She wanted to taste every inch of him, to feel every muscle, every contour. He responded to her unspoken plea, his body pressing more fully against hers. The hair on his chest brushed against her breasts, a delightful friction that sent sparks flying. His hand, which had been resting on her thigh, now moved slowly upward, tracing the delicate curve of her hip, then the soft skin of her belly. His touch was light, almost reverent, yet it carried an undeniable intensity that made her entire body hum. She arched into his touch, a soft involuntary moan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered closed, lost in the symphony of sensations. The warmth of the fire on her skin, the softness of the fur beneath her, the intoxicating scent of him, the rhythmic beat of his heart against her own. It was all-consuming, a beautiful, sensual overload. He kissed her again, a deep, consuming kiss that left her breathless and yearning. His tongue dueled with hers, a playful, passionate dance that ignited a fire deep within her core. She felt herself unraveling, piece by piece, shedding the last vestiges of her guarded self. With him, in this moment, there was only raw emotion, unbridled desire, and an exhilarating sense of freedom. His hand continued its journey, moving lower, brushing against the delicate lace of her briefs. The sheer fabric offered little resistance, only a soft whisper as his fingers grazed the sensitive skin beneath. A sharp intake of breath escaped her, a delicious gasp of anticipation. Her hips instinctively tilted, seeking the warmth, the pressure, the promise of his touch. He watched her, his eyes dark and intense, a silent question in their depths. He was still giving her control, still seeking her consent, even as their bodies trembled with unspoken desire. She responded with a slight nod, her eyes shining with a mixture of eagerness and burgeoning passion. His touch was exquisite, a slow, deliberate exploration that sent waves of pure pleasure coursing through her. She felt herself bloom under his touch, opening like a flower to the sun. The world narrowed to the feel of his fingers, the warmth of his palm, the exquisite pressure that built and built, drawing her deeper into the vortex of sensation. She gasped, her body arching off the rug, a wave of delicious intensity washing over her. Her fingers gripped his shoulders, her nails digging gently into the taut muscles. She felt utterly consumed, utterly lost in the moment, yet paradoxically, more present than she had ever been. He shifted, rising slightly, his eyes still locked on hers. His breath was ragged, his chest heaving, a mirror of her own heightened state. He lowered himself gently, pressing his body fully against hers, the hard planes of his chest against her softness, the strong muscles of his thighs cradling her own. She felt the undeniable strength of him, the power held in check by a tender restraint that only heightened the exquisite tension between them. His lips found hers once more, a deep, soul-shattering kiss that tasted of desire and promise. Her body was alive, humming with a vibrant energy she hadn't known she possessed. Every nerve ending seemed to vibrate, every cell awake and eager. The fire crackled, casting long dancing shadows on the walls, creating a private world just for them, a sanctuary of burgeoning passion. Her hands moved from his hair, tracing the powerful line of his shoulders, then down his back, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her fingertips. She reveled in the strength of him, the firm heat of his skin against hers. It was a dance of give and take, of surrender and claiming, a beautiful wordless conversation that unfolded between their bodies. He moved slowly, deliberately, teasingly, his body pressing against hers in a rhythm that was both ancient and new. She felt the insistent pressure of his desire, a powerful presence that promised unimaginable depths of pleasure. Her hips instinctively rose to meet him, a silent invitation, a primal urge that transcended thought. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his voice a low, husky whisper that sent shivers through her. "Are you ready?" Her breath hitched in her throat. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, yet infused with an undeniable certainty. "Yes, please." With a soft groan he shifted, aligning their bodies perfectly. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a delicious ache that resonated deep within her. She closed her eyes, preparing for the exquisite intimacy that was about to unfold, a journey into the heart of their connection, a deepening of layers she had only just begun to discover. The night stretched out before them, an endless expanse of promise, and she was ready to dive in. His touch was a slow, deliberate unfolding, each movement a discovery, each caress a revelation. He was a master of exquisite torment, drawing out the tension, building it to an almost unbearable peak before offering a glimpse of release. Her body trembled beneath his, a testament to the raw power of their connection, the profound intimacy that was blossoming between them. She felt utterly consumed, yet utterly alive, every nerve ending singing with a vibrant, electrifying energy. The fire continued its soft crackle, an understated soundtrack to the symphony of their burgeoning passion. The world outside the cabin had faded to an irrelevant whisper, leaving only the two of them, entwined in the golden glow, on the soft fur, on the precipice of something extraordinary. His lips moved from hers, tracing a path along her jawline, down the sensitive curve of her neck, sending shivers through her entire being. She tilted her head back, offering him access, her fingers tangling in the soft strands of his hair, pulling him closer, an unspoken plea for more. His breath was warm against her skin, each exhalation a soft caress that ignited new fires within her. She felt the subtle shift of his weight, the powerful lean of his body against hers, a delicious pressure that promised both comfort and exquisite demand. A low murmur escaped his throat, a sound of pure contentment and desire that resonated deep within her core. His hand, warm and firm, slipped from her waist, slowly ascending her back, tracing the delicate line of her spine, before finding purchase at the nape of her neck, his thumb gently stroking the sensitive skin beneath her ear. The world narrowed to this touch, this scent, this breath. Her own hands, trembling slightly with a mixture of anticipation and utter surrender, began to explore the contours of his back, the taut muscles beneath his shirt, the sheer strength of him. She felt the heat radiating from his skin, a magnetic warmth that drew her in, making her feel utterly anchored in his embrace. The thin fabric of their clothing became an unwelcome barrier, an impediment to the raw, desperate need to feel skin on skin. He seemed to read her unspoken desire, his eyes, dark and intense, meeting hers for a fleeting moment of profound understanding before he leaned in, his lips brushing hers as he whispered, "You're beautiful." The words, softly spoken, were more potent than any shout, a tender affirmation that melted away any lingering shyness. With a shared, silent accord, their hands began to work, fumbling gently with buttons and zippers, each unfastening a small, thrilling revelation. The cool cabin air kissed her skin as her shirt was carefully removed, his gaze lingering on her, a possessive warmth that made her blush, yet feel utterly cherished. She returned the favor, her fingers deft but slow, savoring the peeling away of layers. The broad expanse of his chest, the tautness of his abdomen, the powerful curve of his shoulders, each newly revealed inch was an invitation, a landscape of raw masculinity that she longed to explore with every fiber of her being. He shrugged off his shirt, his muscles flexing with the movement, and then he was beside her again, bare chest to bare breast, the contact a jolt of pure electricity. The firelight danced across their bodies, painting them in hues of gold and shadow, making the fur beneath them seem even softer, more inviting. He leaned down, his lips finding the hollow of her throat again, then moving lower, trailing fire across her collarbone, to the swell of her breast. A gasp escaped her as his mouth closed over her, a soft suckling that sent exquisite shivers down to her toes. Her fingers clutched at his hair, her head arching back, lost in the intoxicating pleasure. He paid homage to her body with a reverence that was both tender and intensely passionate, his touch igniting every nerve ending, making her ache with a sweet, insistent longing. She reciprocated, her hands venturing lower, past the waistband of his trousers, her touch bold and curious. A low groan rumbled in his chest, a sound that thrilled her, empowering her. The last vestiges of their clothing were shed with a shared urgency, tossed carelessly aside to join the pile of fur. And then they were truly skin to skin, a symphony of touch and sensation. His legs entwined with hers, the rough hair of his thighs a delightful contrast to the smoothness of her own. The warmth of his erection pressed against her, a potent reminder of the exquisite journey they were about to embark upon. His eyes found hers, deep and unwavering. A silent question, a shared understanding of the profound step they were taking. She nodded, her own gaze filled with a desperate longing, a complete trust. With a slow, deliberate movement, he shifted, positioning himself above her, his weight supported by strong arms, allowing her to feel the full, intoxicating promise of him. He entered her slowly, a breath-stealing invasion that was both gentle and utterly overwhelming. A soft cry escaped her lips, a sound of pure pleasure and relief as their bodies finally perfectly aligned. For a moment, they simply lay there, connected, breathing, allowing the exquisite sensation to wash over them, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through every cell. The world outside the cabin ceased to exist. There was only the rhythm of their breathing, the crackle of the fire, and the intoxicating feel of him filling her. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, He began to move, a gentle, languid that soon gathered pace, becoming more insistent, more demanding. She met him stroke for stroke, her body responding instinctively, her hips arching to meet his thrusts, her fingers digging into the strong muscles of his back. The passion escalated, a whirlwind of sensation, breathlessness, and profound connection. Their eyes were closed, their faces etched with pleasure, their bodies moving in an ancient dance, a primal communion. Each thrust brought them closer to the precipice, a shared ascent towards an unknown, exhilarating peak. She felt herself unraveling, her senses overwhelmed, her mind emptying of everything but the glorious, rhythmic sensation of him moving within her. His murmurs became rougher, more guttural, his grip on her hips tightening, pulling her closer still. And then, with a final, overwhelming surge, they both tumbled over the edge. A shared explosion of pure, unadulterated bliss. Her body convulsed around him, a wave of exquisite pleasure washing over her, leaving her weak and breathless. He cried out her name, his body shuddering above hers before collapsing onto her, his weight a welcome comfort, his breath hot against her ear. They lay tangled together, spent and satisfied, the only sounds their ragged breathing, and the soft hiss of the dying fire. The golden glow still enveloped them, now a comforting blanket, rather than a fiery invitation. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, a silent testament to the profound intimacy they had just shared. She felt utterly cherished, utterly seen, utterly loved. The extraordinary had happened, transforming the cabin from a mere shelter into a sanctuary of shared passion and burgeoning love. As the last embers of the fire glowed, casting long dancing shadows, she nestled closer into his warmth, knowing with a quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of their story. A story written in firelight, on soft fur, and in the deepest chambers of their hearts.